light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I've been saying for quite a few years that a person is a person is a person is a person. And I continue to believe over and over again that that's exactly where we need to start. That in a sort of Dr. Seuss fashion, of Horton Hears a Who, we have to be a who before we can be a he or she, and we have to be a he or she before we can be gay or straight, and we need to give some thought to what it means to be any of those. What it means to be who, to be unique individual consciousness, and then what it means to be a man or to be a woman, and what it means to be gay or to be straight, or to be bi, or to be trans, or to be intersexual, which is perhaps an unfamiliar word for a lot of people, but that's a complex topic for another time. In any case, we also have the challenge of dealing with criminals or criminal activity, those who are classified as the quote bad people, but I don't know if anyone's bad so much as broken. And it's too complex of a subject to get into whether every broken person can be healed or not, but I cannot help but believe that with God all things are possible. But exactly what the path is between here and there, I think we're still working on discovering, or at least I hope we're working on discovering. Some people aren't trying very hard, but we need to keep working on. So this person's been really hurt. How do we heal that? How do we fix that? How do we prevent anyone else from ever being hurt in that way? The point to me, I guess, when Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you and so forth, there's a sense in which you can't throw mud at somebody else without getting some on yourself. You can't accuse someone of being a bad person without running the risk of being labeled by someone as a bad person yourself. And so if one is to ever be a judge or a person charged with those sorts of decision-making responsibilities, you have to be really, really sure that you have a solid basis, and as much as possible that the person who is being labeled or accused is genuinely guilty. And we have lots of things in our legal system that are supposed to prevent miscarriages of justice. Of course, they still happen, unfortunately. But the point is never to stop trying, to keep trying. And the reason we keep trying is because even the most broken criminal, even the most psychologically and emotionally wounded person is still a person. And we cannot devalue their humanity, their basic humanity, without losing some of our own. Just like throwing mud at somebody. You can't say that person doesn't matter without inviting the possibility that someone will at some point in the future say, your humanity does not matter. That when someone is losing their home to foreclosure, and you decide it doesn't matter if they lose their home to foreclosure because you're all set to buy their foreclosed home from the bank for a lower price, that perhaps someday the cycle will repeat and it will be your home that is being lost to foreclosure, and somebody else standing there twiddling their thumbs waiting for the process to complete so they can buy your home for less money from the bank. On a more concise note, some people say what goes around comes around, what you sow you reap. The point to me is still, you cannot devalue someone else's humanity without sacrificing some of your own, because we are really all much more interconnected than a lot of people want to admit. And the wealthy cannot survive without the poor, and the poor cannot survive without the wealthy, and all of human civilization is completely interconnected. The wealthy person who thinks they don't need poor people at all had best not go to the gas station or the restaurant or expect the janitor to empty their wastebasket or anything. I mean, these are all people who are not paid extravagant salaries. They're working class people who are getting by. But if the wealthy person doesn't believe in standing up for those people and taking care of those people, it's my oft-repeated suggestion for an episode of The Twilight Zone, that the wealthy person wakes up one morning having made a disparaging remark about working class people, and the next morning gets up and there aren't any working class people left. They're all gone. And so there's no gas station attendant. There's no cashier at the grocery store. There's no waitress at the restaurant. There's no janitor to empty the wastebasket in the office. There's no receptionist to answer the phone. They're all gone. It takes everybody to make the world. And so in the midst of all that, of course, here comes Sister Who. And somebody asked me once if by being at this particular fundraiser, if it was creating new conversations. And I said, well, not necessarily, because I'm still a stranger to most of the people here. They, to talk about really personal issues, they might, but I wouldn't be in a hurry to expect that, because to talk about really personal issues, you would need to develop some sense of trust and some sense of familiarity, to where they would have to know me as more than that 21st century nun on television, or that sacred clown, that tribal archetype who teaches using symbols and metaphors and questions. They would have to know me as someone with a heart and someone with compassion, somebody with a listening ear. And as the sacred clown, I seem to wander between. The marketing people are always getting mad at me because I can never tell them how to promote my show or anything else I do, because they want to say, well, who's your target audience? And I said, well, humanity. And I'm not trying to be difficult, but I have received responses from every age, race, orientation, and economic group you can imagine. The only thing they all seem to have in common is that they're people who take an honest look in the mirror and think about life. And those sorts of people can be found in all classifications. And so in that sense, it's like I'm moving between this little world of interactivity over there, and this little world over there, and this little world over there, and all these different little subworlds of the local population have in common is that Sister Who has worked with all of them. And they all have people in their membership who are watching Sister Who on television. Thank you very much for watching, if that's the case. In any case, it leaves me walking between the various worlds, but there's also a sense in which it's not just me. It's anybody walking between various worlds. But the point of Sister Who walking between the various worlds and being in each of these different worlds and being such an anomaly is that if Sister Who is there and it's okay, that tells every other person, young, old, whomever, it's okay to be me. I can be as unique as I want, because in all my uniqueness, if I, in whatever I do, piercings, colored hair, whatever, polka music, traditional values, if somebody can be Sister Who and be here and be fine and be accepted and be part of the spectrum of humanity, somebody, a bodybuilder in a dress with gold hiking boots, then probably it's okay to be me too. And so in a sense, simply having Sister Who there is like the canary in the mine. It tells everyone else that it's okay, that it's an indicator that we have a healthy environment. Because if we had an unhealthy environment, it wouldn't be safe for me to be there. In the same way that in mines in times past, because there were problems with poisonous gases in the mines, the miners would take a canary down into the mine with them. And if anything happened to the canary, if the canary died, that was the signal to the miners to get out, because the canaries were more sensitive to poisonous gas than the miners were. And so in a sense, the canary was sacrificed, but the miners could take that as an early warning of a much more significant problem. In a similar sort of way, the anomalous people, those who don't fit in, the one we might even call our enemy, allowing them to be there in a civil, respectful, loving way, within the bounds of nonviolence and mutual respect, is a way of confirming the health of one's community, one's society. At one point in time, I was regularly attending some interfaith liturgical dance meetings, and I suggested that for those like myself who are kind of between masculine and feminine, I'm not like a heterosexual man, and I'm not like a heterosexual woman. I'm gay. I'm a gay man. So I don't fit the two most traditional categories. And so I suggested there should be some sort of song or actually dance, because this has been choreographed as a dance also. A liturgical dance that would recognize anomalous people who walk between the worlds, providing contrasts and challenges, getting people thinking, discouraging social stagnation, keeping things fresh, keeping the water stirred up. In one of my newsletters, I was pondering and reflecting on the whole, the common societal advice of don't make waves. The only thing that ever accomplished, having a pool of water that never gets stirred, that never gets any waves made in it, basically creates initially stagnant water where mosquitoes breed, and ultimately it would be considered a cesspool, maybe a septic pond. I don't think that's what we want. So from time to time, we need to stir things up in a creative, jubilant sort of way, to get everything moving and fresh and aerated again. Sometimes that's necessary, but we can do it in constructive, loving, fun ways rather than doing it in harsh, violent ways. We don't necessarily need to break a dam and flood the town in order to make this happen. There are more constructive, intelligent ways of doing it. In speaking with the leaders of this liturgical dance organization and saying, what about those of us in the middle who don't really fit any of the camp? He said, well, there really wasn't a dance for people like Sister Who, so I thought maybe I should write one. And so I wrote the chorus, and then quite a number of years after that, it needed some verses to flesh out what I was talking about and what this poetry was referring to. And all the contrasts and sometimes bewildering contrasts, that things are so different, we have to hunt to find the commonality and the pattern between them. But lo and behold, when we look, there is some real connective tissue to it. Kind of like the first time they found a platypus in Australia and shot one and sent it back to England, and everybody thought it was a hoax. They wouldn't believe that a platypus was real until they saw a living platypus, because it is such a combination of, it's a mammal that lays eggs and has a duck bill and a beaver tail, and it's such a concoction of parts. It's bizarre. It's a real animal. Where does the platypus belong? Well, apparently the platypus belongs in Australia, but it is a real animal, and it belongs in the chart showing the spectrum of animals on planet Earth. Because if you don't have the platypus, you're leaving a big hole where there should be possibility and reality. And some of us might look in the mirror and see a platypus, that we're this combination of qualities that makes no sense to a lot of people. But we're here, we exist, we're real. And lo and behold, we even have something good to contribute to the life cycle of our planet if we're allowed to make it in a healthy, beautiful, shared sort of way. So But a lot of it on the path there is going to be allowing the disagreement and encouraging the dialogue to persist in spite of the disagreement and in spite of the contrast. To realize that as long as life goes on, the work won't end. It's continually growing, continually evolving, continually becoming. So when we resolve this, kind of like pursuing the horizon. You get to the top of the next ridge, and lo and behold, there's a horizon beyond that one too. Being a form of the sacred clown, that tribal archetype that teaches using symbols and metaphors and contrary actions and questions and riddles and all sorts of things, I decided to call this the Sacred Clown Dance. Political plans, drugs and nutrition, a curriculum that never comes to fruition. So many answers, none remembers what the question was. Which one of us is strange or familiar, a paradox or metaphor so peculiar? According to their categories, I should not exist. Yet in this whirlwind I persist. Stumbling here and there confused, my behavior looks absurd. Sometimes my queries are all off base, and sometimes not even heard. Sometimes the unexpected is all I can give, but in the end I just have to live. On bridges of love and on bridges of life, always and never alone and together. As sacred clowns we dance to thee, backwards and strange, constant in change, blindly perceiving, in giving, receiving. As sacred clowns we dance to thee. God in all forms has called us to be, light in all forms, in you and in me, walking between the worlds. Contrary actions and contrasting faces, a mirror reflection in the strangest of places, in innocence treading wherever this path may lead. Learning so much with every step that I take, never having imagined the rules I would break, never meaning to cause such a fuss anywhere at all, while following my own heart's call. Trusting in what I cannot see, having faith when reason fails, making choices between one thing and another, letting storm winds fill my sails, and finding when at last the sun shines again, that wisdom still prevails. On bridges of love and on bridges of life, always and never alone and together. As sacred clowns we dance to thee. Backwards and strange, constant in change, blindly perceiving, in giving, receiving. As sacred clowns we dance to thee. God in all forms has called us to be, light in all forms, in you stand in me, walking between the worlds. I suppose one of the challenges of being the human race is how little we know each other's stories, and how little we know how much each of us is walking between diverse worlds. That we have the world of our childhood, and the world of our old age, and the world of all the years in between, which may take us around the world or just around the neighborhood, but take us through dozens, if not hundreds, of different ways of looking at the world and of seeing those around us. If we can talk to each other, and if we really know how to listen, the contrast may seem peculiar and strange, but they don't need to be threatening. There's nothing about having someone different standing next to you that's going to change who and what you are. Change who and what you are forcibly or definitely. It's a paradox, which the interesting thing about paradoxes is, I think what makes them a paradox is that they're true. But they sound like paradoxes because it sounds like two things that couldn't happen at the same time. On one hand, having someone who's completely different from you standing next to you can't change you. I could stand next to a black person for the next 3 years, and my skin isn't going to get any darker from standing next to the black person, or their skin isn't getting any lighter from standing next to me. It doesn't rub off. What will change, however, if I stand next to a black person and we talk, and we have dialogue, and we listen to each other's stories, and we begin to sift out what is true about this person from what we thought was true about this person. And, comparing notes and say, oh, well, I thought this would be the case. And, well, no, it's not. And by having that dialogue, by hearing each other's stories, and by not getting into blaming, you're the reason for every bad thing that's happened to me. Yeah, right. I wasn't there, and you weren't there for every bad thing that happened to me. Our lives happen to overlap at this point in time. We've both had ways that we've struggled. We both have ancestors who have struggled in various ways. What matters is what you and I do here in this moment. That you have a world of experience and I have a world of experience. And by talking and listening respectfully and lovingly, we can, in a sense, walk between the worlds, and we will never be the same again, because I will have a new understanding, and you will have a new understanding, and each of us, we hope, will have a newfound respect for the other. And by having that respect and that understanding, we even get to become teammates and collaborators and do things that neither of us could do all by ourselves. Things that are only possible if we love one another enough to work with each other and be with each other and support each other, inspire each other, keep each other trying to, and helping each other not to give up when life gets tough. When it's hard and when there's mourning to do. No one should have to grieve alone. To listen to someone's story and to be able to say, wow, that is really terrible. If the two of us are approached by someone who thinks they want to remake us in a certain fashion, to stand next to that person and say, I don't find your arguments convincing. You say you have evidence. I don't find the evidence convincing. And so you're going to need to respect our ability and our freedom to make our own choices. There have been situations in history where two different groups were working together, and the oppressor, whoever the particular oppressor was, employed a divide and conquer strategy in which they came to people who were working together and started to describe to each why they should not approve of the other, why they should not work together, why they should not be friends. And unfortunately, in some cases, they succeeded and drove the two friends apart. They became enemies, and the oppressor walked in and took whatever the oppressor wanted, because with a divided force, there was no way for the people to defend themselves anymore. We don't have to be the victim of any oppressor who wants to use a divide and conquer strategy. We can say, history's full of mistakes. History's full of tragedies, and every human death is a tragedy. When somebody is murdered, it's a tragedy. It's not about the identity of the victim. It's about the nature of the action. Let us walk with love between the worlds of our stories and the worlds of our diverse experiences, and let us build a better future than any past we can recall. Thank you for joining me for this show.